In the far reaches of the frontier, where the wind cut sharp across the open valley and the mountains, stood like ancient judges. Ilara worked alone beside the half-built cabin she had taken as her final chance at surviving the world's cruelty. Her dress was worn, her boots cracked, and her thin hands shook from exhaustion as she pulled another heavy log toward the frame. She wasn't supposed to be here, not according to the world that had branded her too plain, too small, too unremarkable to deserve anything other than invisibility. But she had chosen to come west, fleeing the whispers, the laughter, the cold stares of people who measured her worth by the curve of her cheek and not the strength of her soul. The land did not care what she looked like. It cared how hard she worked. And work she did. But that morning, as the golden sunlight spilled over the ridge, a sound broke the stillness of her routine, the rhythmic thud of hooves. A cowboy approached slowly atop a dark horse, his posture calm, his hat shadowing eyes that had seen more storms than sunsets. His name was Shepherd Kane, a rancher known across the territory, not for charm or wealth, but for a kind of honesty that made people uncomfortable. He didn't sweeten words, didn't soften truths, didn't pretend to be anything other than what he was, a man alone, trying to survive with dignity. Ilara stiffened as he approached, instinctively bracing herself for judgment, for mockery, for the same look she had received half her life. "Morning," he said, voice deep and quiet. She nodded and kept working, refusing to let him see the tremble in her hands. He watched her a long moment, then dismounted with a slow, deliberate movement. "You're trying to move that log by yourself?" She swallowed, tugged the rope tighter around her shoulder, and answered, "I don't have anyone else." Kane studied her face, dirt-smudged, bruised from yesterday's fall. Exhaustion etched into every line, and he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Grit as strong as iron. He stepped forward. "Let me help." She flinched, not because of fear, but because kindness felt more dangerous than cruelty. "You don't have to." "I know," he replied simply, kneeling to grab the end of the log. Together they moved it to the foundation. By the time they finished, the sun was high, and her arms shook so badly she had to lean against the cabin wall. He stood quietly, not intruding, not staring. That alone made her wary. Men always stared. Men always judged. She wiped sweat from her brow, trying to hide how much the help had mattered. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Saw the smoke from your chimney. Figured someone might be settling alone." Ilara nodded slowly. "People don't usually stop just to help," Kane shrugged. "Most folks ain't. People worth knowing." His honesty startled a tiny laugh out of her, the first in months. But when he looked at her again, really looked, she felt the ache in her chest return. "I know what you're thinking," she whispered, arms curling around herself. "I'm not pretty. I'm not what men expect. I don't fit anyone's idea of a—" He cut her off gently, not with softness, but with truth. "That's fine," he said. "I need honest, not fancy." The words struck deeper than she expected. Fancy was what broke her. Fancy was what people demanded of her. Fancy was what she could never be. But honest, that she had, that she lived. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. "But I see enough," he replied. "A woman who works harder than most men around here. A woman who don't quit even when quitting would be easier. A woman standing alone, but refusing to fall." She turned her face away, blinking hard. Compliments from most men felt like lies. From him, they felt like truth wrapped in grit. He stepped back toward his horse. "I'll check in again tomorrow, if you'll let me." She hesitated, torn between the instinct to protect herself and the deeper instinct, the human, one to accept the help she desperately needed. "All right," she whispered. When he rode off, the valley felt less lonely, less sharp, less cold. She didn't know it yet, but that single moment, the whisper of doubt, the reply of truth, would begin a story neither of them had been brave enough to dream of. A story carved from hardship, healed by honesty and shaped by the kind of love that didn't sparkle on the surface but burned, steady like fire in the winter dark. The days that followed stitched themselves into a rhythm neither Ilara nor Kane had expected, a slow and quiet companionship that grew naturally between two people who had been starved of trust for far too long. Cain arrived each morning with the sun, riding over the ridge as though the valley itself had called him there. And Ilara, though she told herself she didn't wait for him, found her heart tightening when she heard the familiar hoofbeats. Together they worked on the cabin, him lifting timber, her cutting planks, their hands brushed now and then by accident, yet leaving a different kind of warmth behind. The more they worked, the more she learned the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest, like breathing mountain air after years trapped in a crowded room. But even as their bond grew, so did her fear. One evening, as the sunset bled red across the sky, Cain found her sitting alone by the creek, staring at her reflection in the dark water. "You didn't show up today," she said without turning. "I figured maybe you realized I'm not good company." Cain knelt beside her, picking up a stone and rolling it between his fingers. "My horse threw a shoe. I wasn't avoiding you." She nodded, but the tension in her shoulders didn't ease. He watched her carefully. "Something's bothering you. You say you want honesty," she whispered. "So here it is. I'm scared. I'm scared because this is the first time someone sees me for something other than how I look, and every time that's happened before, it ended with me being reminded exactly where I stand." He tossed the stone into the water with a quiet splash. "Where do you think you stand?" She laughed shakily. "Somewhere between invisible and inconvenient." Cain turned to face her, his voice steady but firm. "Ilara, you're the strongest person I've met in 10 years. But strength ain't worth much if you keep beating yourself down before the world gets a chance." She finally met his eyes, seeing a sincerity there that frightened her more than cruelty ever had. "Why do you care?" "Because I know what it's like to be judged by the wrong parts of yourself," he said. "People see my size, my scars, the rough edges. They don't see the truth unless they work for it." She took a shaky breath. "So what do you see in me?" "Something real." The words were simple, but they broke her. Her chest tightened and tears slipped free, not from sadness but relief. Yet before she could answer, a rustle broke through the trees. Riders approached from the ridge. 3 men from the neighboring settlement, known troublemakers, known for thinking the frontier gave them the right to anything they wanted. They rode up close, eyeing her with the same mocking grin she had fled from months ago. "Well now," the leader drawled. "Looks like Cain's been keeping himself company out here." Cain stepped forward, jaw tightening. "Leave. We were just being friendly," the man smirked, eyes lingering too long on Ilara. "Ain't many women out here, and prettier ones than her don't stay single long." Ilara flinched. Old wounds reopened instantly. Before she could speak, Cain was off his feet and in the man's face, voice low and lethal. "You don't talk to her again. You don't look at her again. And you don't set foot near this property unless you're ready to be buried under it." The riders backed off, muttering curses, but they left. When the dust settled, Cain turned to Ilara, expecting anger or fear, but instead she walked slowly toward him, her hands trembling, not from terror but from something deeper. "Why did you fight for me like that?" she whispered. He took off his hat, ran a hand through his graying hair. "Because you keep thinking you ain't worth standing up for. And you are." The tears came again, unstoppable now. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him. "I don't know how to believe that." "Then let me show you," he said softly. The confession settled between them like a promise carved in stone. In the weeks that followed, as the cabin finally took its full shape and the first fire crackled inside it, the quiet partnership transformed into something steady, gentle, and built on truth rather than illusion. Ilara began to speak more, laugh more, trust more, not because Cain made her feel pretty, but because he made her feel seen. And Cain, a man who had convinced himself he would die alone, found his life warming in ways he thought he no longer deserved. One evening he said, "I didn't fall for you because you're fancy. I fell for you because you're real." She rested her forehead against his chest, whispering, "And I'm learning to believe I'm enough." Together, they stood in the doorway of the finished cabin, the valley before them glowing with twilight. their shadows touching like two souls finally home. And in that moment, neither beauty nor perfection mattered, only the truth they had built with their own hands, stronger than the mountains surrounding them,